Now, in the time you're with SAFM, talking, of course, about the issue of music rights and money. Karabo Senna is the General Manager of Sales and Licensing at the South African Music Rights Organisation, SAMRO. Karabo, good morning.
Good morning, Stephen, and it's a pleasure.
Where does all the money go? It's the obvious question.
No, that's a very good question. I was thinking to Billy, and, I'd like to affirm that there's a lot of things that he stated that are obviously correct. The first one is obviously there are different collecting societies which focus on different things. But obviously, just to answer it globally, to say, let's start with the revenue. And I think, Stephen, you hit the nail on the head when you spoke about, the collection of the revenue. So part of the problem why, firstly, an artist would not get what they think is their fair share would be obviously the licensing process. So yes, collecting societies, and that is SAMRO as well, have increased revenue over time. We've seen that, from the previous financial year, we increased revenue just by about 38 million rands. So you would want to see that getting into the hands of the creators. Even now, there is obviously in this financial year an objective to increase it probably even by 100 million rands. So, but the challenges within, this machinery come in where what Billy mentioned there, where he spoke about, firstly, notifications. That's number one. So that's musicians telling us, this is my song, and these are the share splits. So I wrote it with Stephen. It's a 50-50 or maybe 60-40. And then the next part is obviously what we call usage quality. So meaning, I'll make an example and say there's a radio station, they use music, but what is then provided to the, collecting societies may sometimes not be of good quality. Meaning that you end up not firstly knowing who to pay, and that causes societies to reserve money. So when you say reserve, meaning you are not paying that money out. So I'll give you a number. Like for SAMRO, we have something musicians know, we call it undocumented works, in the region of about just over 200 million rands. So this is money that we are actually saying, we want you to come and claim it, but we don't know who, this money belongs to.
Okay, let me just go back a bit here, Karabo. So,
yes.
If you play music on a radio station, you have to keep a record of what is played. You're saying that someone could keep a handwritten record, you can't work out who the actual what was actually played. That's the problem.
Yes.
Okay.
That's the problem.
I do want to put quite a specific point to you, and I think it'll get us to the nub of the question. You will have a certain amount of revenue that will come from radio stations and television, right?
Correct.
Off the top of your head, do you know roughly what that might be?
Yes. So for radio, we call it the radio in general. We distribute this past year just over 200 million rands.
That's what you distributed.
This is what we received, but distribution is 82% of that. So you would say that just of that 200 million, 82% was actually paid out.
Okay, so that's the percentage. That's what I was trying to get to. So The other 18%, what is that? And I accept you have running costs. I'm not shouting at you for having a building.
No. This is after the running costs. So we are literally saying this is the money. When you say 200 million, this is what is after the costs, what we are paying out. So our costs are essentially, let's say at this point, 25 cents to the rand. So if you look at that and you're saying that is being factored out, there's 200 million that we have to pay. 82% of the 200 million was paid out. However, this 18% we are struggling with.
Okay,
right?
Never mind that. I'm going to come back to that. So in other words, if a musician should get 100 rand in a calendar year, they're getting 75 because 25 rand is the collection cost that are your operating costs.
Makes sense, yes.
Okay, now that might sound like a small amount. 25% might sound reasonable, but if your income is 200 million rand, what are you spending 50 million rand on?
So the biggest chunk of it would be, yes, obviously there's labor that goes to that, and resource. The biggest cost, I would say, from our perspective, is the resources that go to ensuring that we are firstly able to license and retain what we call the bilaterals. So the way the world of music works is that we as SAMRO cannot just go out there and sell the South African repertoire. We need to sell. So if you go to SAFM, we need to give you permission to also play international music. So part of it is now trying to ensure that we manage the licenses with all the other societies in the world to make sure that we are able to make sure that you can play, I don't know, maybe a Beyonce song,
Sure.
You can play a whoever song, yes. So those are part of the costs that go into it, even though societies are constantly trying to move those costs down, which what we accept as the best standard would be about 20% of that. That is more the international standard. That's where societies are heading to.
Okay. So then, all the time, I mean, as long as I've been in journalism, I think, I've heard complaints from people like Billy Monama that you or that they're not, let me put it precisely, that musicians are not getting the money that is owed to them. I've heard this complaint time and time again. We've seen the stories
Correct.
of household names living in poverty. Why does this keep happening, in your view?
Yeah. So in my view, I would just focus on three things. The first one would be firstly agreements. Quite often, I know nobody wants to come to a platform like this and sometimes say, I signed a bad agreement. This would be with either a publisher, or a label. So at times, artists do sign bad agreements, which are not necessarily to their benefit. Then the second one would be how artists then actually do share the work. So meaning, if we write the song, the two of us, sometimes people just assume that it might be 50-50, but not necessarily. And what you find is notified with us is actually a different share split, what we call share splits.
Sure.
To what
So like the dispute over Jerusalem right now.
Correct, right?
Okay.
So that comes through. And then the last one would be then what Billy mentioned, to say, when you don't even tell us that you wrote a specific song. So that's obviously on the artist side. But on the SAMRO /Capasso /SAMPRA side, the biggest challenges would be obviously, improving licensing revenue so that, artists can earn. But secondly, and the last one, would be making sure that we try as much as possible to work with our licensees to improve the usage quality that I spoke about, so that we can pay everything that we collect. So it's not about retaining money and then, we just literally over a 3-year period after that, there's a prescription period where we pay it out, but you didn't actually pay to the person whose music was used. You're just paying the money out on literally a pro rata basis in terms of, what would be then the usage of the third year. So those are the things that I would focus on and say, this would be what we need to fix so that we can pay musicians better.
Karabo Senna, thank you, General Manager for Sales and Licensing at the South African Music Rights Organisation.